I thought it would be appropriate for me to do a kind of an overarching video discussing my experience with the sharpening whetstones over these last 6 months. And as you guys know, those who have followed this series, I have spent a lot of time with these stones. And I feel like it would not be fair for me to end the sharpening series without kind of a conclusion video and discuss the pros and cons of each stone and hopefully give you guys a clearer picture of what these stones are capable of. For those who have not watched the series, this is also a good video for you because then you can kind of weed through all of the 60 videos of sharpening knives and kind of get a quick breakdown of what these stones are. And these are the stones that most of you guys will be buying. For those who are getting into stones for the first time, the majority of you will not want to buy a specialty stone from a brand that's not well known, or a natural whetstone, which is very expensive or can be very expensive and very inconsistent in terms of the results that you will get between stone and stone. And so these stones here are mainly stones by well-known manufacturers, and they have a good reputation of offering you consistency and some sort of really a reliable rating of grits that you guys can count on. So I'll start on my right and go to my left, and this is kind of the order that the series kind of followed in terms of how far the stones went. Not 100% close and accurate, but it will give you guys kind of a rough idea of what these stones are like and how they compare to one another. So the first stone here on my right is the Sharpen Pro 1000. Now this stone here is it's a very interesting stone. Now the reason I bought this stone was because in the forums during my initial research, this stone, the brand, came up quite often. It probably is one of the more popular stones, especially with woodworkers. And two things that I would read a lot about is, one, how dense and hard the stone is. It's extremely hard, very thin, very nice, and how slow it wears down, which is actually quite true. It is probably one of the slowest, if not the slowest wearing stone in the lineup right now. Now this stone here is rated at 1000 grits, and in my experience I think that it's closer to a 700 and maybe an 800 grit stone. Reason being is when I compare it to all the other 1000s in the lineup, it just didn't have that fine scratch pattern that I was seeing in the other stones. And in the cut test, it definitely had slightly more rough edges around when I didn't polish the stone on polish the knife on a polishing stone. Most of my tests between these stones were all done with one stone, with one stone against another. So I try to be as objective as I can between the comparisons and as fair as I can as well. And so this stone here really wasn't that, it didn't have that 1000 grit pattern that I was seeing with the other stones. In terms of tactile feedback and hand feel, this is where the stone really fails in my opinion. In feedback, it was very aggressive, right? So you can definitely feel that the stone is doing a lot of work on the knife. But in terms of tactile hand feel, this stone just didn't have that nice sensation of sharpening on it. You know that it's very aggressive, which is great, but it just wasn't pleasurable to sharpen on. It was just very hard. You definitely feel like the knife was being worked on too much, and it just didn't have that that traditional Japanese whetstone feel to it. Even though I know that it's a synthetic stone and is not really meant to replicate a Japanese traditional stone, still there is a part of me that really didn't enjoy the sharpening process on this stone. So really the pros and cons of this stone is it's thin, it's a splash and go, so it is ready to go as soon as you throw water on it. It doesn't absorb any water, so it's a true splash and go. It's very aggressive cutting, very fast cutting, just a little too aggressive and a little too hard to really have a pleasurable sharpening experience on. But this stone, people do love this stone. There is a market for this type of stone, and it's just not, for me, not appropriate for the Japanese kitchen knife market. This next stone is the Arashiyama 1000. This is a splash and go. Now this stone here is actually a very, very good beginner stone, okay? It's very consistent, it's very reliable, and the one thing that I will have to say about this stone is it is pretty true to a 1000 grit stone. In this lineup, I think that the two stones, or maybe 2 or 3 stones that have the truest 1000 grit rating is the Arashiyama and the King 1000. These two stones are probably closest to the 1000 grit rating as any other stone in the lineup. But back to this stone here. In terms of tactile feedback and hand feel, so in terms of feedback, it's good. I would say between, let's say, a scale of 1 to 10, the feedback on this stone is probably between a 7 or an 8. Okay, so it's good feedback. Hand feel, it takes a little bit of getting used to because it does feel muted, but it's also a relatively decent fast cutting stone. So even, a lot of times when a stone is very fast cutting, the feedback is extremely aggressive and very forward and very immediate. This stone here is not as immediate as some of the other stones that we're going to talk about, but it has very good feedback and just a decent hand feel. Okay, so this is an excellent beginner stone to an intermediate stone. For those who are sharpening stainless steel, this is fine. Carbon steel, definitely a good stone for that. But if you're sharpening a very hard stone, a very hard knife, anything with a Hardwell rating of, Rockwell hardness rating of 62 and above, this stone will probably not be the right stone for you. But anything below a 60, up to a 62 or 61, this stone will be perfectly fine for. So any VG10s, any VG5s, carbon steel, carbon white number 1, white number 2, blue number 1, some blue number 2s will be good for this stone. And it's also a very affordable stone. I think the retail price in this stone is $55 or so. And you can get it for a little less if you shop around a little bit. But overall, very good stone, very consistent stone. And one thing that people have mentioned, or I have a couple of subscribers that have told me that though this is a splash and go, it's a stone that you can soak permanently, so you can perma soak this stone. But if you do perma soak this stone, it needs to stay in water and only be taken out when you're sharpening it. So if that's a inconvenience that you are willing to put up with, you can possibly try to soak it overnight or just keep it in water permanently. I haven't gone that route yet. A couple of these stones I have here, I have told you can soak them permanently. I just don't like the idea of keeping stone in water and then having to keep it in water indefinitely. And my stones, I see myself keeping these stones for 10 plus years. So I don't want to keep these stones waterlogged for that long. The next stone here is the Besser 1200. Now this guy here, if you guys research the forums, is a favorite amongst, it's almost a unanimous favorite amongst Japanese knives lovers right now. And the reason is it's a very good feeling stone. It has excellent feedback, a very, very good tactile feel, and it is relatively fast cutting, and it's a nice soaking stone. Okay, so again, this stone here is probably the stone that you'll hear most about, and it's a stone that I have kind of a, I wouldn't say a love or a hate relationship with it, but it's a stone that I have yet to really figure it out. Okay, so this stone I've had soaking for as long as 45 minutes before sharpening, and at 45 minutes it just felt like it was just getting the thirst quenched. Okay, so I thought this stone can probably use a 1 hour to an hour and a half soaking before it really gives you that perfect or that maximum performance that this stone can give you. And that to me is a slight turn off, because anything over a half an hour of soaking time, an inconvenience, because I don't have that much time. So unless you wake up first thing in the morning and you throw this stone in water and you know that you'll sharpen in the next hour or two, I don't have that kind of time. So for me, a soaking stone, anything beyond half an hour or really beyond 45 minutes is a little too long of a soaking stone. However, with that aside, it is a really nice stone. It's a decent cutting stone. People rave about how fine the stone is and how well it cuts, and I will say that it is not as fine as you would think. I would say definitely this is a 1000 or 1200 grit stone. It's not beyond that. Okay, so the grit rating is pretty accurate of what the stone is, which is really good news. The wear on the stone, it's a medium wear stone. It's not a very fast wearing stone. It's not a slow wearing stone. You know, in most of my cuttings, in about 4 to 5 passes, I develop pretty good burr. So, you know, right in the middle of the pack in terms of how fast this cuts. Feedback and hand feel. So in feedback, it is ever slightly muted, just ever slightly, because it is a soaking stone, and soaking stones relative to a splash and go tend to be slightly more muted. And feedback, you know, you know what the knife is doing, which is really, really good on the stone. You never feel like the stone is too deadened or too stiff or too mushy. It's just a very good, positive feeling stone. And there is no question why so many people love it, is because it's a really good price. It's a mid $55 stone. It's a good soaking stone, and it's very hefty. As you can see, it's a thick stone. And overall experience on the stone, it gives you a nice scratch pattern. It's very consistent, and it doesn't dish or gully very quickly. So definitely a good stone if you were in the market for a new whetstone. This stone here, I would say it would suffice for a beginner all the way up to, you know, a medium to intermediate to advanced intermediate. So if you're extremely well versed in sharpening, you may not like the stone, or you may not love the stone. But if you're a beginner all the way up to someone who will sharpen their knives on a weekly basis, this is still a very good stone for you. This here is the Naniwa Superstone 800. Okay, so the Naniwas are a very interesting brand because as a brand, they tend to really underrate their stones, okay? And especially in the Superstone lineup. The Choceras are maybe 10% to maybe 20% higher than the actual grit rating, but the Superstones, we're looking at 30, 40, or sometimes even like a couple 100% higher. And here's why I say that. This here is the 800 grit stone, as we have said. However, it gives you the scratch pattern or the polishing effect of a 3000 grit stone, okay? So, which is really unheard of for an 800 grit stone. And the reason I can say 3000 is because this stone here gives you a almost exact same look physically as the Chocera 3000 polishing stone, okay? So I know that's kind of hard to understand, but you just have to take my word for it. Or you see some of the videos, which I will try to link up to this video, and you will see the finish quality of this stone, of the 800 Superstone versus the 3000 Chocera, and you will see that their scratch pattern is very similar. It's very close to mirror polish, not quite mirror polish yet. Definitely more than a Kasumi finish, so more than that hazel foggy finish that you guys may love, but below a mirror polish finish, okay? So very interesting stone. In terms of tactile feedback and hand feel, this stone feels incredible. It is one of the smoothest stones you will ever use across any brand or any grit stone. For an 800 grit stone, this thing is extremely smooth. I thought that the Syrax 1000 was the smoothest 1000 grit stone, but when I used the Superstone, hands down, this stone is smoother than the 1000 by far, okay? But by smoother than the Syrax 1000 by far, not, well, yeah, it's smoother than any 1000 grit by far. Feedback, it's very good. This stone gives you instant feedback, but the hand feel is because it's so smooth, you have to take a lot of concentration to really know what the knife is doing, because you can very easily feel that you're just polishing the stone and you can just let the knife run on the stone forever and nothing's ever happening. Because it's so quiet and it's so smooth, you have to take a little bit more concentration and a little more effort to feel for the burr and listen to the stone if you can hear it. So the one drawback for the stone, even though it is extremely smooth, it's so quiet that sometimes you forget that you're on a sharpening stone. Other than that, it's a slightly slower cutting stone. It is probably the slowest cutting stone here in the sub 1000 category. Okay, so this actually of all the stones that we're looking at, of the 7 stones here, this is the slowest cutting stone. But other than that, it's still a really good cutting stone. Now, keep in mind that even though it's a very slow cutting stone, I blunt my knives across a brick 20 to 25 strokes per session. So your knife will probably not be as dull as when I start my sharpening process on these stones. So this stone here typically developed a burr in around 6 passes. I think in regular use, 4 passes will give you a decent burr, and definitely a working burr for this stone. So keep in mind, even though it is a slower cutting stone, and this test is probably not going to be that bad compared to your everyday stones that you guys may have now. So overall, very luxurious feeling stone, very smooth, very quiet, just slightly slow cutting, and ever so slightly too much of a polishing stone more than a sharpening stone. Okay, so this here is the King 1000 Deluxe. Now I have the KDS model here, which is the 1000 grit and 6000 grit, but you can easily get the 1000 grit Deluxe, which is a little thicker, a little bigger, and for about $35 or so. This here is a $65 stone, and very good because you get a polishing stone and a sharpening stone, but we're only going to talk about the sharpening stone right now. So this stone here is a stone that does everything well. Okay, it's been the stone that set the standard in terms of sharpening stones for many years now, and really up until the last 3 to 4 years, this was the stone to go to. And for the most part today, it still is that stone that all the manufacturers will compare their 1000 grit rating to. If you read a lot of marketing information of whetstones, you will see that they'll say faster cutting than the King, or smoother than the King, or better wear than the King stone. And so this stone has really done a great job with staying on the market, and it's the reason why I think it's so popular is 2 main reasons. Is one, the grit rating is extremely consistent. It is very much a 1000 grit stone. The formula has never changed. They have changed the hardness of this stone a few times to really make it kind of relevant to today's fancier steel knives. But the formula is very consistent, very reliable. And the second thing that this stone offers so well is the feedback in the hand feel. It's such a pleasure to sharpen on. It is very snappy, though some people will complain that this is a slower cutting stone or a slightly faster wearing stone. In my practice, I find that it's right in the middle of the pack. I develop a burr between 4 and 5 passes most of the time, and it's just very consistent. It has a really amazing light, snappy feel to it, which is really interesting for a 1000 grit stone. It's let's say you compare it to the Besser 1200 or the Arashiyama 1000. These stones feel good, but they don't have a nice snap to it. Okay, this stone has a really nice snap to each stroke that makes it very fun to sharpen on, very pleasurable, and it just gives you that feedback that I really enjoy in a sharpening stone. And it gives you a slight slurry, which is not a heavy slurry. If you see some of the sharpening videos of people sharpening on the King, oftentimes you'll see this really thick, muddy slurry that is developed after really just 30 or 40 seconds of running your knife on this stone. That is because they're using a different grade stone. There is a home version or economy version King 1000 and a commercial professional King 1000, and the KDS is in the professional grade, so it will not wear down as fast as the home use the economy 1000 grit stone. So just keep in mind that when you're seeing that on YouTube, that people are developing these really thick muddy slurs, it's probably on the cheaper 1000 grade stone. Other than that, it's a soaking stone. It takes about a half an hour to really get a good soak. After 15 minutes, you can probably sharpen your knife. It'll feel pretty good, but I find that after a half an hour, It's a very, very good feeling stone. I wouldn't go beyond that because then you risk damaging your stone and having the resin actually break down too far. Overall, this is a really good stone. Definitely one of my favorites in terms of the stones here. One that I will keep for a long time. And also, it's one of them. It's in this lineup at least. It's the most affordable 1000 grit or combination stone. This is the Cerex 1000. Now the Cerex is a very, very interesting stone, and I find that this stone here is interesting to describe because it is a very fast cutting stone. Aside from the Chocera, actually the Chocera and the Cerex are the two fastest cutting stones in this lineup here. But what makes this stone very special is even though it's very aggressive cutting and very fast cutting, it doesn't feel too hard, and it has excellent feedback and excellent tactile feel. Unlike the Sharpen Pro, which is a very fast cutting stone, the feedback wasn't quite there. It was too aggressive feeling, and it just didn't let your hand know exactly what the stone is doing to the knife. This guy here, it's hard, very hard, but not too hard. And it's a soaking stone. Okay, after a half an hour, I find that it's a very good cutting stone after a half an hour. 15 minutes can probably, you'll get away with 15 minutes. It's not as porous as the King 1000. So the King 1000 will absorb water much faster than the Cerex will. But in terms of, hand feel, it is just extremely pleasurable and smooth to sharpen on. This is the second smoothest stone in the lineup, aside from the Naniwa Superstone 800. It felt velvety smooth when I first used it, and it had always, to me, been an extremely smooth feeling stone. I thought it was the smoothest 1000 grit stone until I picked up the Naniwa 800. Okay, so this is, in terms of smoothness, this is second place, only to the Naniwa. So, again, this is the stone that can do everything well. I did not find a single thing to critique or to criticize it about. The only thing that I did not like about this stone, and it only happened once, when I was sharpening it against the Chocera, I felt that this was slightly muted, and that was the first time it's ever happened. Okay, other than that, when I went to the stone the next day and sharpened it against the King, it felt awesome. It was back to being one of my favorite stones of the series. So I only found that it was lacking in feedback, or in that it has a slightly muted sensation once going against the Chocera. But in terms of price, it's a mid-$50, $55 stone. Retail price, I think maybe as high as 60 in some places. But you cannot find anything wrong with this stone. If you're looking for a stone that can do everything well, that can sharpen quickly, that can give you excellent feedback, tactile feel, and slow wearing, and also soaking, there is not a better stone than the Cerex 1000. Okay, so the last stone in the series that I reviewed was the Chocera 800. Now this stone has really become a stone that has changed my opinion of splash and goes. As you guys know, before I reviewed this stone and throughout the first half of the series, I've always kind of mentioned my bias towards soaking stones or against splash and goes. But this stone has really changed all of that. It is extremely fast cutting. It is, the tactile feedback is excellent. It's so excellent, and very instant, very smooth feeling stone. And the hand feel is, though this is a very aggressive cutting stone, very fast, you never feel that it's too aggressive. You never feel like you're out of control in the sharpening process. And it has become essentially my favorite stone if money were not an issue. If you just say, all right, what is the stone that you want to keep, and regardless of price, this is that stone. Okay, it is that good. Other than that, I really have no bad things to say about it. It doesn't load up. You can see that it's extremely clean. It's been sharpened by this point maybe 7 or 8 times on this stone, and it is very, very clean. It very hard stone. It doesn't wear very quickly. It has just a very nice tactile feel. It has a really nice audible pitch to it. It doesn't feel that your knife is grinding too hard. The burr that develops is very even, not too aggressive. I found that the burr on a stone, let's say the Sharpen Pro, is very hard, very aggressive, and is just not evenly even throughout your blade. And so this stone really gives you that control of your knife that I really enjoy. And you know, so that's really this. Again, I have nothing bad to say about this stone. The only negative thing I have to say is it is very expensive. Choceras in general run 30, 40, 50% higher than the equivalent rated stone on another brand. As a matter of fact, I think the Choceras can sometimes run twice the price of the equivalent grit in another brand. That's the only negative thing about this stone. Now there's also a new line of stone called the Professional, made by Naniwa, and it is essentially the Chocera without the base. So if you guys never like the base on these stones, you can buy it without the base. The stones are also even thinner than the Choceras, and they cost more money. So Naniwa is charging you more money for less stone and no base. Way to go. But they've become such a powerhouse of a brand that people will buy their stones, and they are very good stones, and there's nothing, like I said, there's nothing bad I can say about them other than the price. But you know, hopefully that gives you guys a pretty good view or understanding of these stones. Again, I've spent about 6 months sharpening on them almost every day. I've had a lot of time to reflect on these thoughts and to kind of go back and forth. I constantly go back and forth between stones. It's just so that I can really come to a good conclusion or really have a good sense of what I'm saying. All these stones have their purpose. There is a person for every stone here, or there's a stone for every person. These are strictly my opinions. You know, these words that I'm giving you guys, they are very subjective. You know, even though I am trying to be objective in some sense, it's always going to be based on how I feel the stone feels, or you know, what my preferences in terms of feedback and tactile feel is. So just take my words with a grain of salt. There are a lot of people on blogs and on YouTube that will say one thing and that only their words matter, or that everyone else is wrong. I don't want to be that guy that tells you you should only buy one stone, or you should only want to buy one brand. Hopefully you guys got a good sense of what these stones are capable of. If there are other questions that you guys have that I haven't addressed in this video, send me an email or send me a message. You can also go to my page, my channel, and just type in the name of the stone that you guys are interested in, and within this lineup you guys will see all of my videos are arranged by name. So if you guys had questions on the Arashiyama, just type in Arashiyama, and 4 or 5 videos that only have the Arashiyama or compared, you know, to another stone will pop up. With Choceras, it's very easy. I hopefully laid my channel out as logical as possible. But thank you guys for being with me through this series. It has been a lot of fun, and I can really, I really want to tell you guys thank you for those who have given me suggestions. And as you guys can see, a lot of the content that I provide on this channel is heavily user based or user requested, and that's because even though this research is for myself, I want to make it entertaining and fun for you guys to watch. So if you guys didn't like the content that you just saw, you guys know where the thumbs down button is. But if you did enjoy what I've just told you, and you have enjoyed my videos in the past, please give it a thumbs up, and please hit the subscribe button. It really just would motivate me to continue making more videos like this. I also have a polishing series that you guys have probably been watching in between this and the last few episodes. And I have a lot of things that I'm doing in between my knives, my whetstones, my running gear, my cycling gear. So bear with me as you guys are waiting for new content to come out. I'm doing my best, and I'm also a full-time dad, which takes up a lot of my time. And so a lot of these videos are shot at night or only on Saturday mornings. It's kind of difficult for me to do all these videos at this, throughout the week. So I do my best to get content out as quickly as I can and as clear and as fun for you guys to watch as possible. So again, thank you for all of those people who have subscribed so far. Thank you for your comments and for your encouragement. It's been really good to hear from many of you guys. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop me a line. I answer every one of my emails or comments, and I delete all the nasty ones. There's been a few, so not many. But again, enjoy your day, and I will see you in the next video.